Thank you very much, everyone, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's really great being here. And Carly actually was the one who brought me into this council. And when she asked me if I wanted to be a strategic partner, I was like, of course, are you kidding me? I would love to, be honored. And so it wasn't long before I was like, done, here you go, would love to do it. And really support everyone here that's on the call, on the Zoom call. So I think there's maybe about 14 of you. So for all of you listening, thank you so much. And I promise, yes, it's insurance, but today I'm going to be talking about just 3 things, right? Which I'll get into here in just a few moments. But just as a quick bio, like Harley said, I'm an insurance agent, right? And I own my agency here in Encino, California. I'm sure many of you know where that is. And we have about 25 different companies that we shop around with, which is the importance of insurance, is just making sure that you have the best deal all the time, every time. That's kind of the most important thing, because I'm sure y'all know insurance rates have gone up over the years, and I'm sure there's a lot of that out there. So importance of shopping. But nonetheless, I do own my agency here in Encino. I do employ several agents that work with me, and I'm really excited to be here with you. But today I'm going to be going over 3 things, right? I'm going to be talking about how to network from home, and then I'm going to be talking about creating a podcast, which I did, and I'll give you the rundown because I'm no extreme professional on the podcast, but I can tell you how to get it done. So that way you can, emphasize and further explore your brand, right? And then allow people the opportunity to really get to know you better, right? Because if there's one thing that we are all in, we're all in the relationship business. That is one thing we are all in. And the most important things in life are the relationships that you create with others. Right? Yes, we're in business to sell real estate. Yes, we're in business to sell insurance. But at the end of the day, it's a human-to-human relationship experience that we're doing for everybody, and which matters the most. Because people may not remember exactly what you told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. Right? And that is a really important thing, especially in a dull industry like insurance. If you can create a positive experience around a brand, right? Then that's going to strengthen your brand retention, right, and your brand profile as well. So without further ado, so I'm going to talk about network. First one was totally relevant in today's market, which is networking from home. Right. As you can see, my lovely, suite here, I'm working from home, probably like most of you are too. Right. And I think the biggest thing with networking from home, and hopefully as COVID starts to go down, vaccines go up, and people start to venture out, and we can actually, I don't know, see people in person again, that would be lovely. But in the meantime, it's like, well, you want to make sure to grow your business while working from home. Right. And so how do you do that? Well, I have a couple things that I'd like to share. And obviously, if there's anything that you want to ask or include, don't hesitate towards the end if you want to share any comments. But the first one, and this is one of the biggest things that I, with one of my employees that I was working with, and I asked him, I said, how much time did you spend on the phone today? And ask yourself that question. How much time did you spend talking to somebody or people? Right? And if the answer to that question is like less than an hour or an hour or 2, then you got to move that number up. Okay. The biggest thing that, in my experience, right, is getting on the phone. And one of the things that I did, and I challenge you all, right, to actually try to be cognizant of how much time you're actually on the phone, right? And it can be on the phone, it can be a Zoom call, Google Hangouts. It doesn't matter. Like when I say phone, I mean like just talking with somebody, and that can be like what we're doing right here through video, or it can be, like I said, on the phone, Google Meet, FaceTime, WhatsApp, doesn't matter what it is. But how much time are you spending on the phone? And when I was looking through one of my employees' production numbers, right, and I was asking him like how he's doing, I noticed that his production was tied to the amount of time that he was on the phone. More time on the phone meant that he probably was able to increase his numbers. And I would imagine it's the same exact thing in real estate, right? So I think the biggest thing is to make sure that, number one, we're networking from home. Pick up the phone, right? You know what I mean? Like, the home and the homes, right, aren't going to sell themselves. And there is some elbow grease and some elbow work that's going to be involved from you to start. So that's the biggest one, is be on the phone. And also to, like, engage your network. Like, if you're networking from home, you got to think to yourself, you're like, how do I start with being able to get more people to know who I am, right? Well, biggest thing is start with the people that you know, right? That's the 80-20 rule. I'm sure you've heard that before. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work, right? And then that's a common thread that happens not just in insurance and not just in real estate. But try to gravitate towards those who you feel are actually doing a little bit more, and then engage with them and ask them how they're doing, right? And when you're speaking with people, clients, potential clients, old friends, or whatever it may be, the old adage, right? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionately, right? You want to ask questions, right? You want to ask people, how are they doing? What's new with their life? And like triggers, right? Like maybe one of your friends or clients is, getting married soon, or maybe there's a baby on the way. These types of life events, right, can really lead to creating a reason for people to want to do something, right? Which is motivation, right? Motive meeting a reason, right? So motivation. So people have different motivations. And so understanding, right, what those motivations are will essentially help you then position yourself to guiding them to the right set of people to make their dream come true, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, with regards to networking, I always say, ask questions. And what questions do you want to be asking? Open-ended questions. And probably you know what this is, right? Is an open-ended question is a question that starts with how, what, or why, right? How are you? What have you been up to? Tell me a little bit about the last 6 months of your life. What's new? And then stop talking. Literally be quiet, right? You want to allow them the opportunity to, like, give you information about what it is, right? About what's going on in their life. And so that's definitely something that I highly recommend, is when you're networking, is you want to ask those open-ended questions, not like, are you, like, a closed question would be a yes or no, right? So you don't want to ask a question that would be like, are you tired today? That's a yes or no, and that's going to be a very, that's a very short answer, and then it's kind of awkward, right? Because you're like, okay, now what? So you want to make sure to ask those open-ended questions, right? And then asking them what's new. So in a nutshell, I think that, so that's that. So networking from home. Next, I'm going to pivot to podcast. And I created a podcast. If you go to my Instagram, which is an easy way, I'm at Nick Ramirez Agent on Instagram. Feel free to engage. My website's there. I think the link to my podcast is there. If you want to write this down, a great platform to start a podcast. People are like, they ask me, like, how did you do it? Where'd you get started? This, that, whatever. It's a website called anchor.fm, anchor.fm. Okay, so if you want to create your own podcast, anchor.fm is a great platform. It's free. They have Spotify integrations, so if you want to include music into your podcast, you can, which is kind of cool. And they give you all the tools necessary. You can even record a podcast from your cell phone. You don't even need. I bought a microphone. One of those, like, mics that you, like, that looks like a studio mic. Didn't need to. So you don't need to. You don't need all that, right? Headphones. Hardwired headphones, I think these sometimes when you're recording are better than the podcast. But I would recommend that you do that. And before you sign up and you create your podcast through anchor.fm, the old adage, right? Plan your work, then work your plan, right? Plan your work, then work your plan. And so you have to know what it is that you're even going to talk about, because you don't want to start talking and have an aimless, clueless, random podcast where you're talking about something with no direction, right? So you want to be able to know what you're going to talk about. You have to have a couple things that you're passionate about, right? And so my recommendation is, before you actually sign up and do all of that, think for a few minutes and write it down. What if I were to do 12 podcasts, 12 episodes, right? And I were to talk for 10 minutes each, right? What would I be talking about? Right? And ask yourself, and as a real estate agent, right? What's important to you? If you could think about 12 things, and why did I pick 12? Because you could do one per month, right? And so that would be a thing that I would highly recommend, that if you do one per month, because real talk, doing a podcast and being up to speed with it, it can be burdensome, right? It's because you're balancing work and then podcasts, and there's a lot of things that you're doing on the marketing front. Okay, so that would be a thing that I would recommend, is plan your work your plan, have 12 podcasts that you want to talk about, and then make sure you kind of have an idea what you're doing, and then go for it. Podcasts don't necessarily mean that people are going to just randomly hear it and then hit you up for business. That could happen. What I use it for is when a client asks me a question, and you know how this works, we're all busy. Sometimes they'll ask a certain set of questions or something where they wanted a detailed answer. And I may not have had enough time, maybe it's late at night, or I'll email them back late at night and say, you know what, great question. Check out my link on my podcast. I actually talk about that, right? And so it's wonderful. And I can tell you that if it's used correctly, I had a husband and wife who listened to the podcast before I was doing my insurance presentation for home and auto and earthquake and umbrella and that whole thing. And then the husband cut me off and he asked me a question. And before I had a chance to answer, the wife interrupted me and said, honey, had you listened to the podcast, you'd have known the answer to that. And I just died laughing. I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. So, but at the end of the day, that creates that experience. It creates like that bond with your clients. And it's just great to be able to have in your repertoire, to be able to show them that, you're a subject matter expert, SME, subject matter expert on what it is that you do, which is real estate. And the last one, very briefly, how to spider network. And this is my last point. Spider networking, what is that? And Natalia, our pleasure. Spider networking, what is that? Have you heard of it? Right? It's not having to do with it's nothing with arachnophobia. There are no actual spiders at all. Spider networking is working with other people, right, that are also referral partners in your world. Okay, those referral partners can be CPAs, they can be other loan officers, other real estate agents. They can be people, moms groups, right? Different support groups, things of this nature, right? That if you can become friends with them and then ask them who they might know. And so it's like warm leads, if that makes sense. And so spider networking is really easy. You just want to kind of reach out to the people that you know and trust, that know and trust you too, that can vouch for you and make that introduction. And that's a really easy way to do that. So in a nutshell, that's that. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share a couple things with you all. And please do connect with me on the gram. I'm at Nick Ramirez Agent. And thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share today. And I'm so happy and proud to be an Emerald sponsor for the group. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick. So many information. So I've never did the podcast, but I'm gonna try. So many technology coming, and then but we need to utilize. And then so is this easy to set up podcast?
It is, yeah. So once you have everything set up, you just go to anchor.fm and you create your account. It takes just minutes to do. And then you just need to have like a little, headphones or microphone, whatever, to be able to talk into. There's some technicality. You're kind of recording yourself, into you're recording little clips, and then you kind of drag and move the clips the way that you want it. There's editing tools as well. So like my recommendation is, if you're talking on the podcast and you're like 10 minutes in and then you screw up, which it's okay, it happens. Don't delete it. Just keep going. You can edit that little section out later. So that would be a recommendation. And in terms of earphones, I mean, like anything, my recommendation on earphones is just, if you're just hardwired, you want to make sure that there's like a mic that's close to your mouth so you have a good audio connection. You don't want to use like ear pods because it's not as clear. You know, and then if you wanted to go to a nicer microphone, you can, and there are plenty on Amazon that you can get for $30-$40 as well. And then Tani asked a question regarding insurance. So yeah, so we do homeowners insurance, auto insurance, earthquake insurance, flood insurance, business insurance. It doesn't matter. I always joke with my referral partners and realtors and lenders. I'm like, if it has the word insurance in it, just hit me up, you know. And that's a thing that we can always help with, right? And then and yes, and then shout out to Tina also, who's also a Goosehead agent joining us today. And we also do pet insurance, right, for your baby pets. So we do that. Absolutely. And we do life insurance. There's a lot of that going out there too. So like people, sometimes you have a client, and this may be a good thing to kind of recommend to them, that if they're buying a brand new home, they're getting a $300,000 or $400,000, $700,000 mortgage with Carly, right? You know, if there's a kid, you want to make sure to get life insurance, because God forbid, heaven forbid, something happens with COVID, everything going on. The uncertainty just makes sense. You know, it's smart to have, and you know, a term life insurance policy for 30 years, if you're healthy, might be like 30, 40, $50 a month. It's not a lot of money, you know. Obviously there are more life products that we can get into, but for a base, that's a good start.
I see. Great. Thank you so much. So is anybody have some questions to Nick? So I think people typed in the chat, but if you want to say something, please unmute and ask some questions. Okay, so
Nick, could I? Sorry, it's Renee again. Sorry, don't want to hog the questions here.
Okay.
Hi, Renee.
Thank you, Nick, for your presentation. Enjoyed that. Question about building your audience for your podcast. How do you do that?
So building the audience, this is a great question. Thank you for that. And I think a lot of it is utilizing the network that you may already have, right? So it's really because you got to know who you're talking to, and that's really important, right? Because you don't want to just talk. It's always, you're right. It's always important about knowing who is your audience. So trying to really identify before you start your podcast who you're talking to, right? And so if you're going to talk to a first-time home buyer, fantastic, right? Then cultivate your language and your messaging around that. And then you want to try to put that podcast where those first-time home buyers are. And that could be different groups that regarding, and here's an easy one. Where are the renters? If you're renting, right? So they could be a renters group. It could be, you know, trying to find out, maybe there's an homeowners, an association that has a bunch of, and I know there are ways, some lenders are able to figure out where renters are. I think there's a way to do that.
Title. Yeah.
What's that?
The title.
Title. There you go. Title search. So,
and
there you go. Exactly. So there are ways to be able to try to identify those tenants as well, those tenants to be able to help kind of mold that. And I would just consider and recommend, Renee, that once you know exactly what your audience is and who that is, custom tailor that message, and then try to put that target that audience, right? That's why they call it target audience, you know, to them, so that they can be like, Renee is speaking to me. I need to hit her up, right? Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Nick.
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. And if there's one last thing I would say though to everybody is this: when I used to be, I was one of the in-house insurance trainers for Keller Williams in Calabasas many little while back. And one of the things that I would always ask realtors is, you know, when you have a buyer, right? How many of you say you're going to need a home insurance quote? Go call whoever has your auto insurance. How many of you say that? And a bunch of people raised their hand. And I was like, great. Stop doing that. Don't do that anymore. You want to refer the home, the buyer of the home, to an insurance agent who can shop the market, because whoever has their auto insurance may not be competitive for the home that they're buying. I get the multi-policy discount, but they can do a rebundle with a different carrier at that location. It all varies on zip code and fire line scores and a bunch of other things. So my recommendation is, when you have a buyer, recommend them to an insurance agent like Tina or myself, who can shop 25 carriers, get the best deal for home and auto in that zip code, in that area. And that typically makes for a better experience. So that's my last one. So thank you.